Andrea is really one of those people that cultivates feminist spaces all over campus, whether it's through one-on-one mentorship with burgeoning feminist students, her course on LBGT and queer life in the United States, or her support of student and postdoc-run organizations like this conference and programming. So she's really a force here at Stanford. She's also a former firefighter, which I think is just badass in general, and a fellow historian, and the author of a book, Saving San Francisco, Relief and Recovery After the 1906 Disaster. So as the Associate Director at Clayman, she works on creating opportunities for women's leadership and sustainable gender equality. And she's going to speak briefly about a couple of programs we have going on Clayman before we get into our Speak Out and Hackathon. So thank you, Andrea.
Welcome back, everyone, from the lunch break. I'm really excited that I get to kick off this afternoon's conversations. And Ashley and Allison asked me to speak a little bit about the future of feminism, and because that's the title I noticed on the agenda. But I've thought about it and realized that you've made my job an easy one, because the future of feminism is right here in this room and on Twitter at the same time. It was just a few years ago at the Clayman Institute that we actually hosted a panel on the future of feminism. And for that, we had the editors from the early days of Ms. Magazine, along with some young feminist bloggers. And after a really great panel, we opened it up for questions, and one of the first questions came from a very sincere older feminist in the audience. And I should stop and say that I am an older feminist, and I don't believe that's true, but my daughters and my students remind me of that all the time. And her question was, it was genuine, her question was, where are all the young feminists? And the bloggers on the panel quickly answered, we're online. And I was left wondering if they were thinking what I was thinking, which was, didn't you listen to the presentation? And so thank you, Feminista. I lost track of where you are at the table now. Thank you, Feminista, for the quick lesson in hashtags. But thank you, too, maybe more importantly, for reminding us to listen to each other. And I want to say, too, as a historian, I am a huge fan of Paula Giddings, and I feel like we're so fortunate that she's the one who's framed our conversation today. I think this is what we need. And historical narratives, as she was reminding us last night and today, they create powerful forces. Paula Giddings calls them paradigms that give voice or meaning to a story, even as they silence the many voices that are shaping that very story. So rethinking that historical narrative, Paula Giddings walked us through the historical narrative of the feminist movement. It tells us a very different story. And I remain hopeful, for one, that retelling stories and continuing to retell stories opens up new spaces to forge alliances and coalitions today. Now, as Shelley Carell, the director of the Clayman Institute, reminded us this morning, the Clayman Institute has its own historical narrative that started in 1974. And it's no coincidence that happened really at the height of what some people call the second wave of feminism. And the Institute has this history that combines activism with research, and at its heart, its founding was about giving women a space to articulate their voices. And we literally have a space. We have a house on campus. The university can't get rid of us, and every time they develop new buildings, they just pick us up and move us. But we know they can't tear us down because we're historic landmarks. That's one benefit to being part of history. But today gives us an opportunity at the Clayman Institute to keep writing our narrative. And I see us as moving beyond the limitations of our physical space, not just our house that we have on campus, we're so fortunate to have it, but the space that we have within the academy itself, and move into the public world of online feminism. Now, technology gives us seemingly unlimited and real-time access to the real world. And the potential for visibility and voice is also real. But as many of us know from experience, or at least from what we've heard today, that this is not as simple as it sounds. With this incredible opportunity comes formidable silencing forces. The reality of physical danger from speaking out online is all too real. So too is the reality, as Feminista aptly called it this morning, of silencing tactics. Now, take us back to the 1970s, I have to as a historian. There was a popular phrase that was often repeated, not by everyone, but well known across the country. The phrase was, the personal is political. Today, it seems to me that the personal is public. And we hold an opportunity in our hands, hopefully this joke works, sometimes in our fingers, depends on the size of your device, to share our stories and create narratives. And as Emily May said this morning, never before have our stories mattered so much. From the conversations that Paula Giddings started last night and that were shared this morning, it's clear to me that we're living in a historical moment. It's a historical moment where we have the capacity to change, not just replicate the narrative. So I'm looking forward to the conversations this afternoon and forging alliances that start with creating the space to speak, but also the space to listen. Thanks so much.
All right, thank you so much, Andrea. The name of the conference is The Challenges and Possibilities of Online Feminism. In this portion of the day, which we have called the Speak Out, we want to focus on addressing personal and collective challenges to online feminist activism. We will channel these debates into collaboration in the hackathon later this afternoon.
So in the Speak Out, have you guys heard of a Speak Out before? It's kind of an old school feminist term, right, from the 60s, where everybody gets together, you talk about, and it's so apt that Andrea mentioned the personal is political. You take the personal, right, and you move to a collective political space with it together. So we want to give you the opportunity to voice some of the concerns that you may have experienced personally or with groups that you worked with, feminist groups that have been the target of attacks. And we want to ask you to think about these 4 questions, which are: what are some of the most formidable challenges faced by online feminists? How have you been targeted by online negativity? How do online feminist spaces today perpetuate inclusivity or exclusivity? And then what is the role, positive or negative, of hashtags in the feminist movement? So in order that you hear a diversity of voices, we're going to broaden your discussion groups. So you see there's table groupings listed below. And you don't have to stay at your table. You can go outside. You can go anywhere. You can move to the back of the room, around the room. But this is really a moment for you guys to talk about your own experiences with it. And here also we want to invite you to use the articles that we mentioned ahead of time with the trolling and the hashtag feminism from Time. I think they're great jumping off points for understanding how people experience the negativity and also the possibilities of what can happen with online feminism and hashtags.